How you doing?
How you doing? I'll try these on. These they don't do a thing for me.
You know the last thing my grandfather ever said to me?
What?
Sorry about the nose.
He is the definition of rock star contradictions, the guy famous for wild chainsaw pranks in hotel lobbies who secretly battled anxiety behind closed doors. Joe Walsh is the legendary Eagles guitarist whose life swung from hilarious presidential campaigns to devastating personal loss. But here's a question. Which famous rock star did Joe Walsh break up with because he feared their shared drug addiction would be fatal? Drop your guess in the comments. I'll reveal the answer later. Get ready to uncover how a terrifying blackout on a flight to Paris became his wake-up call, and how Joe finally found peace after decades of chaos. Keep watching for the untold truth behind the laughter and fame. Yet, to genuinely grasp his incredible journey, we must rewind to his earliest days. That's where crucial moments that defined everything are hidden. Early life. Joe Walsh was born into post-war America, a world buzzing with rock and roll energy and shifting family ideals. Yet his own childhood began with tragedy. Just shy of 2 years old, Joe lost his father, a military pilot killed in a jet crash, an event that would haunt him deeply, quietly planting a lifelong unease with air travel. Moving constantly from Ohio to Chicago, then New York and New Jersey, Joe became the perpetual new kid, cautious about making friends he'd soon leave behind. It was the 1950s, a time of drive-ins, transistor radios, and neighborhoods where every kid knew each other, except Joe, who felt like an outsider wherever he went. Undiagnosed ADHD and Asperger's further complicated his early years, turning classrooms into daily battlegrounds and friendships into mysteries he couldn't easily solve. But Joe found refuge in humor, becoming the class clown to ease his anxious introspection. At school, he even took up the oboe, not out of passion, but because it let him skip homeroom each morning. Still, everything changed when Joe saw the Beatles perform on Ed Sullivan. Suddenly, music wasn't just a distraction, it was a lifeline. Picking up the guitar became his solace, something no one had to force him into practicing. When tragedy struck again at Kent State, where classmates fell to gunfire during protests, Joe learned firsthand the pain of loss and the cost of division, moments that forged his compassionate worldview. Nevertheless, these painful, formative experiences were exactly what shaped Joe Walsh into an artist uniquely capable of channeling humor, heartache, and hope into unforgettable music. Career and success. Joe Walsh's career took off in the late 1960s with the James Gang, quickly earning a reputation as a rock guitarist whose gritty sound stood apart. But just as fame beckoned, Joe surprised everyone by walking away from guaranteed stardom, turning down a spot in the high-profile band Humble Pie. Instead, he escaped to Colorado, forming Barnstorm and embracing the creative freedom he'd long craved, perhaps a reaction to the restless uncertainty he'd felt since childhood. When the Eagles invited him on board in 1975, his wild personality initially clashed with their polished country rock image. Bandmate Don Henley openly worried Walsh was too unpredictable. But ironically, Joe's chaotic energy became exactly what the band needed. Songs like Life in the Fast Lane, infused with Joe's reckless swagger, reinvigorated the Eagles, launching them to unprecedented success. Offstage, Joe was as much comedian as musician, running mock presidential campaigns promising free gas for everyone, and pulling outrageous hotel pranks, like firing up a chainsaw to scare hotel staff, a hilarious trick he'd learned from mentor Keith Moon. Yet beneath the laughter and bravado, darker shadows loomed. Addiction began consuming him, blurring the lines between rock star antics and personal tragedy. When the Eagles split, Joe spiraled downward, feeling lost and irrelevant through much of the 1980s. By the early 90s, a blackout on a plane to Paris marked a terrifying low. Joe realized he had to choose between life and the chaos he'd always embraced. Nevertheless, Joe Walsh's journey through success, humor, tragedy, and eventual redemption didn't just shape his legacy, it profoundly impacted his fortune. for better and for worse. Income and net worth. Joe Walsh's net worth is estimated at $75 million. This wealth stems from his extensive career with the Eagles, his solo projects, and strategic investments. His tenure with the Eagles, especially during the Hotel California era, significantly boosted his earnings through album sales and tours. Solo hits like Rocky Mountain Way and Life's Been Good further contributed to his financial success. Additionally, Walsh has made savvy real estate investments, including properties in Beverly Hills, which have appreciated over time. However, his wealth has seen fluctuations due to personal challenges, including periods of addiction and the financial strains that accompanied them. Despite these setbacks, Walsh's continued involvement in music and prudent investments have helped him maintain a substantial net worth. Still beyond the numbers, it's Joe's unique lifestyle, marked by both eccentricity and resilience, that truly defines his journey. Lifestyle insights. Joe Walsh's lifestyle is a kaleidoscope of contradictions, equal parts wild rock star legend and quiet, introspective soul. Known widely for his outrageous hotel escapades, famously brandishing a chainsaw just to resolve disputes with hotel staff, Joe has always had an eye for comedic absurdity. Yet behind the spectacle and laughter, Walsh has quietly nurtured surprising, deeply personal interests, reflecting the complexities beneath his playful persona. One of his most enduring passions is ham radio, a hobby that might seem out of place for someone best known for shredding guitar solos on stadium stages. From his teenage years when he first became fascinated with amateur radio in New York, Joe found solace chatting anonymously over shortwave frequencies. His call sign, WB6ACU, is familiar among radio enthusiasts who respect him for achieving the highest possible amateur license. Joe even humorously embedded Morse code messages into his music, subtly urging fans to register and vote, proving his creativity wasn't limited to just melodies and lyrics. Another striking hobby Walsh cultivated is blacksmithing. Yes, the iconic guitarist who famously shredded solos with the Eagles is equally comfortable in a leather apron, hammering red-hot iron in a forge. When questioned about risking his hands, Walsh humorously retorted that he didn't want to become soft simply because he played guitar, highlighting his natural comedic instinct and determination to remain grounded. Yet Joe's carefree lifestyle once tipped dangerously into chaos, dominated by substance abuse and reckless behavior. A dramatic wake-up call came in 1994 when he found himself on a plane descending into Paris. Utterly confused. He had boarded the flight in a blackout and had no memory of it. This terrifying moment shook him to his core, signaling clearly that the rock star lifestyle he had so proudly flaunted had spiraled completely out of control. From that moment, Joe's path to sobriety began, marking a crucial turning point in his life. Embracing sobriety transformed his daily routine, replacing late-night parties and hotel destruction with structured habits that promoted clarity and well-being. Joe became vocal about the realities of recovery, humorously yet poignantly reflecting on his struggle with addiction. In his 2012 album, Analog Man, he gently poked fun at himself for being stuck in the past, preferring old-school records and vintage gear over digital trends, even as he embraced tech-savvy gadgets on stage. His quirky balance between analog nostalgia and modern innovation perfectly symbolizes the contradictory yet charming aspects of his lifestyle. Alongside these personal changes, Joe redirected his energies into meaningful philanthropy. He founded VetSaid in 2017, a charity deeply personal to him, stemming from losing his father, an Air Force pilot, in childhood. VetSaid supports veterans and military families, filling the void of support Joe himself felt as a Gold Star kid. His annual concerts gather high-profile performers, illustrating how his transformation from wild rocker to committed advocate mirrors his profound internal shift. Though his lifestyle may have softened in intensity, it never lost its signature humor and charm. Joe continues to joke about his past excesses, famously recalling hotel rooms destroyed and laughing about walking into closets instead of exits after wild parties. Still, beneath the laughter lies genuine introspection, revealing an artist who learned hard lessons through humor, tragedy, and eventual redemption. Nevertheless, perhaps the most meaningful and transformative chapters in Joe Walsh's story aren't found on stage, in hotels, or even in his beloved radio room, but rather within the personal relationships that reshaped his world, bringing profound clarity, joy, and even deeper revelations. Relationships and connections. Joe Walsh's personal life has been as vivid and turbulent as his career, marked by deep love, devastating loss, and surprising moments of redemption. Married 5 times, Joe navigated relationships through periods of fame-induced chaos and deep personal struggle. Most famously, his romance with Stevie Nicks became an iconic love story of rock history, passionate yet dangerously entangled in their shared battle with addiction. Fearing their mutual habit would turn fatal, Joe made the agonizing decision to end the relationship, leaving Stevie heartbroken but likely saving both their lives.
In your life, one of the great romances was Stevie Nicks of Fleetwood Mac. But she says you were the love of her life and probably still are.
She's special.
Tragedy also left its imprint on Joe's life in the cruelest way possible. In 1974, his daughter Emma died tragically at just 2.5 years old, plunging Joe into profound grief. His album So What, featuring the poignant song for Emma, expressed the numbness and despair he felt, profoundly reshaping his emotional landscape. Yet redemption eventually followed. After years of neglecting fatherhood, sobriety finally allowed Joe to rebuild his relationship with his children, notably daughter Lucy, who publicly chronicled their heartfelt journey from estrangement to understanding. In 2008, marrying Marjorie Bach brought newfound stability, making him brother-in-law to Beatles legend Ringo Starr. This extended family provided the warm, supportive environment he'd missed since childhood, reshaping his outlook and giving him something he'd long craved. Nonetheless, beyond the bonds of family and friendship, the homes Joe Walsh chose and built became reflections of his evolving inner world, offering another window into his complex, fascinating life. Real estate. Throughout his life, Joe Walsh's real estate choices have mirrored his personal evolution, from restless rock star excess to the peace and stability he eventually embraced. One of Joe's most iconic homes was his sophisticated contemporary estate in Beverly Hills, offering both privacy and luxury, perfect for a rocker known for both eccentricity and introspection. Another significant property was his custom-built 5,096-square-foot home in Studio City, purchased in 1991. Featuring a striking media room and a unique brass bar, this residence symbolized the peak of Joe's lavish lifestyle during his transition from wild antics toward personal renewal. Later, as Joe solidified his sobriety and found lasting happiness in his personal life, his choice in homes reflected this transformation. He acquired a luxurious yet serene bungalow in Sherman Oaks, California, in 2023 with his wife Marjorie Bach, valuing comfort and simplicity over extravagant excess. Their new home, complete with an inviting backyard pool and thoughtfully designed spaces, highlighted his newfound appreciation for tranquility and family. Joe also previously owned a charming East Coast-style farmhouse in Montecito, nestled peacefully among oak trees. This retreat embodied his desire for seclusion and emotional healing, contrasting starkly with the chaos of his earlier years. Nonetheless, Joe Walsh's tastes for fine living didn't stop at real estate. His passion for powerful vehicles provides another glimpse into the captivating contradictions and fascinating dimensions of his life. Vehicles and cars. Joe Walsh's passion for powerful vehicles perfectly embodies the bold, eccentric spirit that made him a rock legend. Cars have always held a special place in his heart, especially his beloved 1962 Maserati 5000 GT Alemanno, one of only 34 ever made. Joe famously referenced this obsession in his satirical hit, Life's Been Good, humorously boasting about losing his license because he drove too fast, capturing his playful approach to life behind the wheel. Alongside his rare classics, Walsh also embraced modern muscle, owning a 2007 Ford Mustang GT 500, a nod to his lasting love for speed and performance. But before fame, Joe's image was defined by motorcycles. Back in his James Gang days, his iconic leather motorcycle jacket symbolized rebellion, freedom, and youthful recklessness, qualities that perfectly match his emerging rock star persona. Interestingly, despite his rock and roll lifestyle, Joe has never publicly owned a private jet. Perhaps the emotional shadow left by his father's fatal plane crash, coupled with his own terrifying mid-flight blackout, left Joe cautious about air travel. Likewise, despite his wealth, Joe never felt compelled to flaunt yachts or helicopters, perhaps signaling a deeper, quieter preference beneath his flamboyant image. Nonetheless, Joe Walsh's story is far from finished, and the vehicles he's cherished over the years reflect far more than just an appetite for speed. They symbolize a life lived boldly, often on the edge, setting the stage for the reflective, purposeful man he's become today. Current lifestyle. Today, Joe Walsh stands as a vibrant testament to resilience, renewal, and rock and roll longevity. He's currently captivating fans with the Eagles' groundbreaking residency at the Sphere in Las Vegas, thrilling audiences with immersive visuals and iconic hits like Hotel California and Life's Been Good. Offstage, Joe's dedication to philanthropy remains deeply personal. His annual VetSaid concerts, honoring his father's memory, bring together legends and new artists alike, showcasing Joe's commitment to healing and giving back. Recently, Walsh reunited with his early bandmates from the James Gang, reigniting nostalgia for the joyful spontaneity of his early career. Yet Joe's reflections nowadays often center on gratitude and sobriety rather than fame or fortune. He openly shares how his journey from rock-bottom addiction to peaceful sobriety has become his proudest achievement, allowing him to reconnect meaningfully with family, especially his daughter Lucy, and find a sense of peace that once seemed impossible. Now in his 70s, Joe Walsh is clear-eyed about his legacy, not just as a legendary guitarist, but as a man who turned personal tragedy into compassion, chaos into clarity, and heartbreak into lasting healing. And it's precisely these transformations that have come to define the real Joe Walsh. What part of Joe's journey surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, hit like, subscribe for more stories like this, and check out our next video for another unforgettable legend.